Yes.
know?
Now we can hear.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for giving me time and opportunity to interact with all the faculty of Jawaharlal Nehru Krishi Vishwavidyalaya and the presenters from all over the world. As you guys know, this is very presenting time. We are going through the pandemic has initiated in December 19, and still, right now we are under a big stress all around globe, and especially in terms of the global economy and the food security. These are the two things the most important for us uh, to run the globe and the trade everywhere. So I'm happy. Uh, like the Jawaharlal Nehru Krishi Vishwavidyalaya has took this initiative to talk on that issue. So my topic is the impacts of global economy and the food security of the global the COVID-19. So let me start that. As you guys know, the outbreak of pandemic COVID all over the world has disturbed the political, social, economic, religious, and financial structures of the whole world. World's topmost economies such as US, China, UK, Germany, Italy, Japan, and the many others. Stock markets around the world have been pounded and oil prices have fallen off a cliff. In just a week, 3.3 million Americans applied for unemployment, and week later, another 6.6 million people started searching for jobs.
Mandeep
Okay,
sir, please be loud.
okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir, please be loud because your voice is not very clear.
Okay, I'll try to speak loudly. So, the managing director of the International Monetary Fund, Chris explained the recession at least as bad as during the global financial crisis or was. Stock markets are severely damaged by the COVID-19. Stock markets of the United States is down by 30%. By looking over the existing condition of several businesses, most of the investors are removing its money from multiple businesses in this regard, and almost 83 billion US dollars has already been removed from emerging markets since the outbreak of COVID-19. So 80 countries have already requested International Monetary Fund for financial help. The Organization for the Economic Cooperation and Development, that is OECD, stated that the global growth could be cut to half to 1.5% in 2020 if the virus continues to spread. And the MD of IMF suggested that four things need to be done to fight against
Hello,
COVID-19 and
excuse
avoid
me.
previous losses.
The screen is not visible. Cannot see the screen.
I think we need to see the slide also, please.
Yes, slides are not visible. Nothing is coming.
Slides I already sent to you, but I don't know.
No, screens are visible.
Yes, the screen are visible. No
Yeah,
problem
the
at all.
screens are visible. You can continue.
Yes, continue, please.
Yeah.
It's my request to everyone,
So
kindly pin
firstly,
him.
continue with the
Kindly pin
essential.
his screen. Kindly pin the screen of Dr. Mandeep Pujara, please. Then it will be the visible.
Should I continue?
Sir, please continue. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, please.
So firstly, continue with the essential containment measures and the support for the health system that was, told by the MD of the IMF. Secondly, huge affected people and firms with large, timely targeted fiscal and the financial sector measures. Thirdly, reduce stress to the financial system and avoid contagion. Fourthly, must plan for recovery and must minimize the potential stirring efforts of the crisis through policy action. So I want to share some of the statistics and the facts related to the COVID-19. And while there is no way to tell exactly what the economic damage from the global COVID-19 novel coronavirus pandemic will be, there's a widespread agreement among economists that it will have severe negative impacts on the global economy. As I told you, what the MD of the IMF already said. Early estimates predicted that should the virus become a global pandemic, most major economies will lose at least 2% of the value their gross domestic product over 2020. Leading economists to already reduce their 2020 forecast of global economic growth down from around 3% to 2.4%. To put this number in perspective, global GDP was estimated at around 86.6 trillion US dollars in 2019, meaning that just a 0.4% drop in economic growth amounts to almost 3.5 trillion US dollars in lost economic output. However, these predictions were made prior to the COVID-19 becoming a global pandemic and before the implementation of widespread restrictions on social contact to stop the spread of virus. Since then, global stock markets have suffered dramatic falls due to the outbreak, and Dow Jones reported its largest ever single-day fall of almost 3,000 points on March 16, 2020, beating its previous record of 2,300 points that was set only 4 days earlier. So now I'll come to the impacts on the global economy. So the first impact will be the markets are more integrated and interlinked with the Chinese economy that contributes 16% to the global gross domestic product. Thus, any shock that affects China now has far greater consequences for the world economy. As you guys know very well, how China market is dominating, all over the globe, and how they are the supplier of all the manufacturing goods, and that's basically, what's everybody's economy, every country's economy is connected to the Chinese economy. So the second is the supply shocks due to morbidity and the mortality, but also the containment efforts that restrict mobility and higher cost of doing business due to the stricter supply chains and tightening of credit will affect economies, leading to a reduction of economic growth or an economic recession. In March, the OECD cuts its forecast for global economic growth in 2020 from 2.9% to 2.4%, as I told earlier in the statistics, which would be the lowest level since the financial crisis a decade ago. Barring that prolonged and a more intensive coronavirus epidemic could even halve this figure to mere 1.5%. The third is the demand will also fall due to the higher uncertainty, increased precautionary behavior, containment efforts, and rising financial costs that reduce the ability to spend. Finally, there's a significant devaluation of the exchange rate with respect to the US dollar, which will also affect the import-dependent countries. So the global food markets are immune to these developments. However, they are likely to be less affected than other sectors that are more exposed to logistical disruption and weakened demand, such as travel, manufacturing, and energy markets. But given the complexity of the food value chains and the importance of the trade and transportation, this could make them extremely vulnerable. While COVID-19 likely represents a deflationary shock for the global economy, reflected in earlier move by the FAO price index, in the short term, the real cost of the healthy diet may rise because of the increase in the cost of perishable commodities. As you know, the mobility is a big problem these days, so that definitely the cost will rise, which would have particularly at best impact on low-income households and raise the price of progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals. So they're connected to the United Nations, Sustainable Development Goals. So this affects, as shown in 2019, the state of food security and nutrition in the world will be most importantly in countries with high commodity import dependence. Here, the negative impact is stronger as a 1% increase in commodity import dependence causes an average increase in undernourishment of 3.8% per year. When the country is food import dependent, there is an average increase in undernourishment of 8% per year. Furthermore, the demand shock will contribute to prolonging and worsening the effect. So now I'll discuss the negative impacts on food security. So, we discussed a lot about the impacts on the global economy due to COVID-19. So the connection of the global economy with the food security and how it affects the but it is affected by the COVID-19 till date. So both lives and livelihoods are at risk from this pandemic, as everybody knows. Like from the last 4 months, that started in December, so it's almost 6 months, I can say. So world has seen a new time, new era, and new kind of restrictions, the movement, the mobility of the goods, and the fall of the big economies, and the steep fall in the GDP everywhere. So in some countries, the spread of the pandemic has been slowing down and cases are decreasing. In others, the COVID-19 is resurging or continuing to spread quickly. This is still a global problem calling for a global response. So we know that it will eventually retreat, but we don't know how fast this will happen. We also know that this shock is somewhat unusual as it affects significant elements of both food supply and demand. We risk a looming food crisis unless measures are taken fast to protect the most vulnerable, keep global food supply chains alive, and mitigate the pandemic's impacts across the food system. Border closures, quarantines, and the market, supply chain, and the trade disruptions are restricting people access to sufficient, diverse, and nutritious sources of food, especially in countries hit hard by the virus or already affected by high levels of food insecurity. But there's no need for the world to panic. Globally, there's enough food for everyone. Policymakers around the world need to be careful not to repeat the mistakes made during the 2007-8 food crisis, and in turns this health crisis into an entirely avoidable food crisis. So the Food and Agriculture Organization.
Yeah, beat your mother.
There's some disrupt. Can I continue?
Yes.
Yes, sir. Please continue, sir.
So I was discussing about the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations is particularly concerned about the people access to the food in the medium and the long run. Actually, the
Sir,
significant
please
slowdown
present your
of
screen, sir. Mishra, sir. Please again share. Respected Mishra, sir, please share your screen again, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sure, sure.
Yes.
Sure.
kindly mute your microphones. Actually, that's disturbing me. Should I continue?
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, so we were discussing about the Food and Agriculture Organizations concerned about the food demand and the supply. So the significant slowdown of all the economies of the world, especially of the most vulnerable one, and as unemployment rates have risen, as I told you, the 3.3 million people in the United States applied for, the support from the government. And that's the case with, I think, all over the globe. Everywhere, people are unemployed and they are just, getting support from the government and, they are maintaining their livelihood. So as unemployment rates have risen and the COVID-19's in economic impacts will be felt more, will make countries, especially food import dependent countries. Here I'm, stressing again and again on the food importing countries. That's the, they are at the risk. Struggle to have the needed resources to buy food. In turn, as demand for food will decrease over the next months, prices should go down in 2020, and this will have a negative impact on farmers and the agriculture sector. So that has connection with the farmers' income. As of now, disruptions have made minimal as food supply has been adequate and markets have been stable so far. However, we have already seen challenges in terms of logistic bottlenecks, which have by mid-April largely resolved, and likely there is less food of high volume quantities like fruit and vegetables being brought to market. So as of May, we still expect disruption in the food supply chains, especially in the five value commodities. For example, restriction of movement as well as basic conversion behavior by workers, like may impede farmers from farming and food processors who handle the vast majority of agricultural products from processing, like the shortage of fertilizers, veterinary medicines, and other inputs could affect agricultural production in the long term. Closure of restaurants and less frequent grocery shoppings diminish demand for fresh produce and fisheries products, affecting producers and suppliers. Sectors in agriculture, fisheries, and aquaculture are particularly affected by restriction on tourism, closure of restaurants and cafe and school meals suspensions. In any scenario, the most affected will be the poorest and most vulnerable segment of the population, including migrants and the displaced and those hit by the conflict. Countries in protected crisis also suffer from underinvestment in public health, which will amplify the pandemic's impacts. So, as far as we discussed about the impact of COVID-19 on the global economy and the food security. So now the point is like how we can mitigate these, impacts on the food security. So there are a few points we can discuss, like how we can, work on that to help to mitigate this impact of COVID-19 on the food security. So proactive measures are paramount and will cost less at a time when economic resources will be highly needed. This is probably the case given growing expectations of global recession. Economic slowdowns or contractions were associated with rising hunger level in 65 out of 77 countries in recent years. As FAO and partners warned in the 2019 the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World Report. To avoid disruptions to the food supply chain and food production, FAO is urging all countries to keep international trade open and take measures that protect their food supply chain. From obtaining inputs from such as seeds to sharing smallholder farmers have access to markets to sell their produce, like as what is happening here in the North American region. The US and the Canada border is already closed from the last 4 months. Like they closed the borders on 18th of March. But the essential movement is still going on, like especially the food movement in these countries like Canada and the US. And Canada, number of affected due to the COVID-19 is quite less as compared to the US, because US already crossed the 2 million mark, but the Canada is at just the 100,000. So they restricted the movement on the borders, but they actually allowed the movement of the truckers to carry food items from the US to Canada and the Canada to US. So that's the basically due to the recommendation by the FAO and the mutual understanding of these two governments. So to keep international trade open and take measures that protect the food supply chain. The second is focus on the needs of the most vulnerable and scale up social protection programs, including cash transfers. So the government are working on that, and I'm hoping like we are working in partnership with many organizations around the globe to keep these movements in place to for the movement of the food. So keep the domestic food supply value chains alive and functioning. So the food supply value chains has a biggest role in the farmer's prosperity, and the other side, the consumer and the middleman too. So talking all necessary precautions, seed and planting materials must continue to flow to smallholder borders. That's specifically for the countries with the maximum number of the small farmers. Annual fee to livestock breeders, like to get the meat and the milk, and aquaculture inputs to fish farmers. Keep agricultural supply chains alive by any means while the safety and the well-being of everyone working along the food chain is protected. Maintain the agricultural activities. So these are the few actually the mitigation recommendations. Some more details about the recommendation. The countries should meet the immediate food needs of the vulnerable population because they are at the stake. As we are talking about the Indian subcontinent, the people actually are more vulnerable for the food needs, as we used to listen about like how the migrant labors are affecting, and the people living in the remote areas are at the stake this time. So countries should boost their social protection programs to support their population for their needs, like maximum dependencies on agricultural, the practices. So we need to, start new social protection program to reach everyone who is in need. So the countries should gain efficiencies and try to reduce trade-related costs. So that's the biggest thing, like to cut down the cost in the trade related, especially the food. If you really want to be a food secure world, and specifically for the countries who are in a big loss these days, and their population is unstable and they are not getting the right amount of food, and not the people are actually undernourished. So thank you very much. That was my topic, like the COVID-19 impacts on the global economy and the food security. So I tried to explain with a few points, like how COVID-19 has impacted the global economy and the food security, and the numbers, related to that, and the mitigation strategies to, overcome this COVID-19 impact on the global economy, and especially the food security. Thank you very much for everyone for watching and listening me on this. And I'm really thankful, everybody. You are actually getting this presentation from the Global Alliance for the Food and Agriculture, an organization who is working. It's a platform to every organization who's working in the food and agriculture sphere to provide the platform for the agriculture technology transfer, and especially for the agricultural extension and the business related processes. Thank you very much once again for listening and giving me an opportunity to speak on this platform.
Thank you, Dr. Pujara, for giving the detailed account of the impact of the COVID-19 across the world and how to cope up the different issues related to our economy and the agriculture and health. So thank you very much on behalf of our university, Jawaharlal Nehru Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, and on behalf of the College of Agriculture, Tikamgarh, the Dean of that college, Dr. Saravgi, and on my behalf, I extend my gratitude and thanks also for sparing some time for us for enriching our knowledge in the field of the food security. Thank you very much, sir. I will request you to spare 5 minutes particularly for the questions. So anybody has any question, you kindly ask to Dr. Pujara. He'll let you know the answer.
Hello, I am Dr. R.K. Nema.
Sir,
May I ask one question? Actually, I was listening the lecture very carefully, and it was very thoughtful lecture. Only thing is, when he was explaining the proactive measures, and the few measures are very grassroots measures, and one he explained that international trade should be opened. I want little more exposure on this, how this will affect the COVID effect, how will let the impact will go down with the international trade open, please.
I don't understand your question. Can you repeat it?
How the opening of international trade will affect the impact of the COVID-19.
Okay.
How the international trade will cope up the bad effect of
I'll
the
give you an
COVID-19.
example. So how the trade will affect, it will help in spreading of the COVID-19. You're asking. Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Are you asking about the impact of trade on the COVID?
No.
Right, or something else? Your voice was.
No, I was asking that how the opening of international trade will reduce the impact of COVID-19. You have included in proactive measures. No?
Okay. Okay. So the answer is like we need to actually follow the guidelines by the health authorities actually. So we are not in a situation to get normalcy in the few months. We need to learn to live with this pandemic. So we can't restrict the international movement of the food items, because that will affect in a long term with the agriculture and the farmers in the last two. So we need to make it open, like as I told you about the Canada and US example, how these countries are doing. The non-essential travel is banned. Like nobody is moving in these countries for the tourism or the life purpose, but the essential movement is on. So we need to focus on the agriculture only, like especially the food items movement. We need to open up all the borders, so especially like to put agriculture movement into the essential movement, so that can help farmers at the one end and the consumer on the other end to get the food security in force. So that's the case, because I have a lot of news from the India that they produce, they're dumping their produce in the farms only, like the tomatoes, all the perishable items, especially like fruit and the vegetables. So we need to put these modes in the essential travel for supporting the whole supply chain and the value chain. Hope that will.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay.
Anybody want to ask any question from Dr. Mandeep? Other participants? Anybody? If they are not there, then I hand over the mic.
Hello.
Yeah.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning.
Actually, we are discussing about this food supply chains. So, at farmer level, how the supply chains are changed, like marketing channels.
So, can you repeat your question?
Like at farmer level, while he is the marketing channel from farmer to markets.
I don't understand your question actually.
As we are discussing about the break-in food supply system.
Uh-huh.
So, how at farmer level, how the marketing channel has been changed?
Okay, so how the marketing channel, like we need to actually go for, it's a slogan like we need to uh, think global and work local. So at the farmer level, farmers need to learn to market their produce on their own. Uh, I think the COVID-19 pandemic will make people learn to purchase local from the local farmers, to support local farmers, as the movement is restricted in these days. So the coming days, I think they will rely on their farmers at the local level, and they support their farmers at the local level, and that will build the new supply chain at the local level, and especially by the farmers and the consumer, and it will shorten the actually and it will remove the gap from the farmers to the consumer, and the middleman will be eliminated. So the new kind of the agriculture marketing, the farm marketing will emerge post COVID-19, and I think each and every stakeholder in the whole supply chain process will understand and will support local farmers, and local farmers will get support from the farmers directly.
Thank you, sir.
Anybody?
Yeah, you're welcome.
Anybody wants to ask any question?
Hello, sir. I have a question, sir.
Hello.
You ask.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So how does agriculture production affect the global GDP, and how does it affect the inflation and hike in prices in global trade?
As I told you by the statistics, the agriculture production is not getting the required amount of input at present due to the restricted movement for the inputs and all. So in the coming days, the production will go down, and that definitely the GDP is all about the gross domestic product, like whatever is produced in that particular area, or the territory, or the land, or the country. So the only two things are coming out of soil. One is agriculture produce, and another are minerals. Minerals are at stake because they are actually attached to the manufacturing. And the other side, the agriculture. So agriculture production is coming out, but that's not in that quantity whatever is required. So the movement is restricted, and definitely the consumption pattern will change in the coming days. So the GDP, like dependent on the agriculture, will definitely come down just because of not getting the required amount of inputs for the production one, and the other side is the restriction in the movement. So that's the the post COVID-19 impacts on the agriculture GDP.
So, Dr. Karim, you want to ask any question? Dr. Karim from Bangladesh, please unmute. Dr. Karim from Bangladesh, kindly unmute. If I think there is no any further questions, so I, on behalf of all the participants, I again extend the gratitude and thank to Dr. Pujara for sparing time, even it is night in Canada. You might be ready to go to bed.
It's midnight in Canada. It's about 11:14
That's
p.m.
yeah. You might be sleepy.
From the
I
GMT.
think even then you spared some time for us. So really, we are thankful. So thank you, sir.
You're welcome, and hope everybody has enjoyed the facts and the figures and the discussion and whatever I have presented. And I welcome everybody again. Like you can drop me an email anytime for the questions or any kind of the partnership for the food security in future and especially the sustainable development. Thank you very much again.
Okay, thank you once again. Since friends, since Dr. R. K. Nema has joined this our first session, so I will hand over the mic to Dr. Nema. So he will take the other presentation by chairing the session. Dr. Nema, sir.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kevat.
You
And
continue, sir.
again, I thank you, Dr. Mandeep. But I don't know whether the inauguration is going on after this,
Yes,
or
sir.
it will.
Yes, sir.
So you can go ahead with that, and then we'll continue.
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Okay. So.
Okay, once again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening on behalf of Jawaharlal Nehru Krishi Vishwavidyalaya, College of Agriculture, टीकमगढ़, मध्य प्रदेश, इंडिया। आप सभी को इंडिया से नमस्ते। I hope you all are fine,